In the next hour on Proof Positive. They're known as remote viewers. They use a psychic energy to pinpoint the location of a designated target that could be anywhere in the world.
The guy claimed to have some kind of psychic powers, that he could travel with just his mind anywhere he wanted. He called it remote viewing. Gus told me that back in the 80s, he was part of a top-secret unit that got their training in the Army, in a program sanctioned by the highest levels of government. He said,
"We were psychic spies."
Here today, with the help of Proof Positive, we're going to take a look at remote viewing and show that it does really work. Statistically has been proven. We're going to offer some ideas. We're going to see the great Targ and Puthoff as they are giving their descriptions of what has happened and how it has been used by the military.
"Is that you were a psychic spy like Lacey?"
We prefer the term remote viewer.
How does that work?
Well, different Jedi had different techniques.
These people appear to be sleeping. In fact, they are remote viewing, connecting to a person, place, or thing they've been instructed to psychically locate.
There has been an enormous amount written in various books about what the CIA did or did not do about remote viewing. Some of the stuff is fairly amazing, if not credible. Our first speaker, whom I have known for about 35 years, looks like a man who knows where the secrets are, and in fact does. And tonight he's going to share some of them with us. I met Hal Puthoff back in the early 70s. He had a national reputation as a physicist working in laser and laser optics, who got interested in remote viewing, and who, along with Russell Targ, were the founding scientists of that laboratory. It is a real pleasure to get Hal to come out and talk about this. You're going to hear stuff you haven't heard anywhere else, and you're going to hear it from the person who really does know where the truth lies. It's my pleasure to give you Hal Puthoff.
This program began in 1972, and I'm going to begin with a history of the program just to give you some perspective on exactly what the conditions are in which it started. Historically, it was a top secret, what's called Special Access Program, an SAP. Special Access Program means that even if someone has a top secret clearance, they may not necessarily have access to the program. It's covered by various code words: Grill Flame, Sunstreak, Stargate. These are some of the names. So unless you were on a list to have access to these code word materials, you did not get access just because you had a top secret clearance.
I saw the target and she had short blonde hair and it appeared to be back.
I felt that the beacon was moving about 80% of the time. My feeling of what the target was doing was constant motion, this blissful state of weaving and moving, sort of like an amusement park ride.
My favorite scientific graph is money in the bank. We went into the market for 30 days, made $26,000. Of course, the dentist made $260,000. So this actually has practical outcomes. I mean, this was also partly in response to another skeptic who said, well, if these people are so psychic, why aren't they rich? Why don't they go to Las Vegas? Why aren't they in the stock market? Blah, blah, blah. You know, which they actually do, but they don't advertise it. So anyway, this was our proof that, you know, it can happen, it can work. So where are we? In the scientific community, we have people like astrophysicists who worry about the stars. We have biologists who worry about the trees and the soil and so on. But, you know, there's always going to be some percentage of renegade physicists like myself and my colleagues who always want to probe deeper, look behind the scenes, see what's really going on, explore new territories, and that's how we ended up getting involved in such a long and, from my standpoint, very productive program. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Imagine being able to visualize in your mind actual events that are taking place hundreds of miles away. David Morehouse, a former CIA agent, believes anyone can do it. He's perfected a psychic spying technique called remote viewing, and he says he can generate the evidence to back up his claims.
Exactly what remote viewing is allowing someone to do is to see persons, places, or things distant in space-time.
In the 1980s, David Morehouse was a commander in the Army Rangers. During a training mission in the Middle East, he was wounded in the head. While recovering, he discovered he had apparent psychic powers. It earned him reassignment to a classified unit of the CIA.
I was sent to a special access program codenamed Sunstreak at that time and trained to become one of America's top secret psychic spies called remote viewers. Every day that we came to work, we worked a rogues gallery of targets. It was a constant barrage of things that were ugly and sinister and moving targets.
As part of a remote viewing team, Morehouse worked hundreds of cases. From searching for a Soviet jet that crashed in a jungle carrying an atomic bomb, to tracking suspected double agents. His most famous case was helping to determine the cause of the 1989 Pan Am 103 crash over Lockerbie, Scotland.
The rumors are that the CIA spent around $50 million to continue to pay for the scientific research and development of coordinate remote viewing.
Much of that money went to funding a program at Stanford University that was headed up by this man, physicist Russell Targ.
Remote viewing is very easy to do. It's like a musical ability. There will, of course, be psychic superstars just as there are musical prodigies. But what pleased us very much is that we were able to train to a greater or lesser extent almost everyone who came into our laboratory.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. My name is Russell Targ, and I'm a physicist. And it's my great pleasure to tell you about the remarkable work we did at Stanford Research Institute investigating psychic abilities. We did that for the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, NASA, and many, many other intelligence agencies, part of the U.S. government intelligence system. I got into all this as a childhood magician, standing on the stage in New York doing mental magic. And I had the experience from time to time of having a direct perception of something in the life stream of the person whose mind I was pretending to read, or whose fortune I was pretending to tell. So I was not a real psychic. I was just a kid doing magic. But I've now talked to people like Kreskin and Melbourne Christopher, and they said, oh yes, every professional magician knows that from time to time you're given some material, and you can then supplement your magic trick with whatever ESP comes to you. And there are many magicians who do that, as we know. But I was not doing magic for the CIA, because as we know, the CIA is not easily amused, and we were trying to do the real thing for them. The work we did at SRI involved things like finding a downed Russian airplane in North Africa with code books on it, locating a kidnapped American general in northern Italy, looking into a Soviet weapons factory in Soviet Siberia, describing the construction of a huge Soviet submarine in northern Russia. And we even looked on a Chinese atomic bomb test 3 days before it was scheduled to go off, and described correctly that it was going to fail. So we did quite a lot of useful things for the government during our 23-year program.
Morehouse shares the notion that anyone can be taught remote viewing. So in 1991, he left the CIA and later developed a remote viewing training program that has attracted nearly 11,000 recruits.
Now, we don't make any pretense that it is 100% accurate. We recognize that it has its limitations, but it is also a tremendous tool that allows us to see something distant in space-time and come back with a very accurate picture of what is there.
We selected 12 remote viewers from throughout the United States and Canada and flew them to Los Angeles. Each of the viewers has undergone extended training with Morehouse. They've been told nothing about their task in advance.
I have every expectation when given the mission that they will do exactly what they have been asked to do.
The remote viewers are a diverse group, but they all share the same confidence in their skills. Ted Macy is a real estate broker from Atlanta, Georgia.
If it's a defined target, then we can get there. You collect as much information as you can. Sometimes you get one small piece, and another time you might get 100 different pieces.
Nicole Whitney is a radio talk show host in Vancouver, Canada.
I don't think there's anything that's a hard target, actually. If you can get to any place in time and space using this, how can anywhere be hard to get to?
Rommel Lozano works as a psychiatric counselor in San Diego, California.
It's something that I'm experiencing myself. And then also, it's something that I know that I'm watching it at the same time.
Before the test begins, Morehouse distributes a tasking sheet. The instructions are brief and to the point.
Okay, welcome to target tasking number 1. And your special instructions for this particular target. It is a beacon target, and the beacon can be located anywhere. You have 1 hour to complete the tasking and 30 minutes to prepare a written summary with sketches. Describe the beacon physically, describe the activities of the beacon, and describe the location of the beacon.
The beacon is the designated target, the person the viewers have been instructed to locate and describe. The location of the beacon can be anywhere in the world. For our test, the beacon is 25-year-old Jennifer Lehman.
I don't think that they'll be able to read my thoughts. I don't think they'll be able to even know where I'm at. I'm so skeptical.
The test begins. For the next hour, the beacon will drive a predetermined route through Los Angeles. Miles away, the remote viewers begin their process, unaware that the beacon is in the same city.
It's much more difficult for the viewers if the beacon is moving, because it's not a stationary piece of scenery for them, it's things moving by. And they're essentially looking through the eyes of the beacon, so they're looking and seeing what the beacon is seeing.
Each viewer uses his or her own technique to reach a meditative state. This allows them to focus their psychic energies to hone in on the energy emanating from the beacon. At the end of the hour, they will have 30 minutes to write their summaries. The remote viewers do not talk or share information at any time. Sergeant Rhett Price of the California Highway Patrol will observe the testing. He's interested to see if remote viewing can be used in police work.
There's always going to be skepticism in the law enforcement community when it comes to new things that are not traditional. We look at things in black and white, and either you can do it or you can't, and we don't look beyond to any other methodologies to help us solve cases or mysteries or whatever you want to call them.
Right from the start on, I know that there is this vibrational energy of moving up and down.
I saw a fountain that had a number of water spouts coming up and popping up into the air.
For this target, I definitely got a sense that it was close. It felt like she was on a bike the whole time. And then all of a sudden, there was this dark trail that I was into, and then I saw this tunnel of light.
We're looking for colors, we're looking for textures, we're looking for dimensionals and shapes and sizes and temperatures and smells and tastes, all of those things.
I saw two buildings that kind of intersected. To me, it looked somewhat Asian in architecture.
My speculation is that it was one of those rides, you know, like in Disneyland.
In your sessions and return to sanctuary, and when you're ready, begin preparing your session summaries.
An hour has passed. The viewing session is over. The group now has 30 minutes to complete their written notes and sketches. When they are finished, Morehouse will review the summaries with the beacon.
It goes on to say that there were shops and stores that bordered on a very large green space, a park or a garden of some sort. So a large park or something. Were you near a park?
Right, we were at one point, we were near Echo Park.
Okay.
The next day, Morehouse will retrace the entire route and compare the remote viewer's sketches to what the beacon would have passed along the way. Since there is no accepted scientific methodology to test remote viewing, the accuracy of the sketches and written descriptions will be the gauge of success.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow.
Will any of the sketches and descriptions match? Will this case be judged proof positive? The answers at the end of the show.
Well, hey everyone, how you doing today? Well, we're coming with a special video for you today. We're in the neighborhood where Ingo Swann used to live until a short time ago when he passed over in January of this year, 2013. And I wanted to make this little video for you because I was fortunate enough to be able to have a conversation with him in January, just a few days before that happened, and I was able to ask him about why he thought remote viewing worked, what some of the mechanisms were, and he brought up some very interesting information that was new to me, and I just felt I should really share it with you. I talked to him on the phone a few times, and when I finally went over there, we talked about all sorts of RV history and things that were going on with it and science topics, and you know, he was just a great guy, and you could talk to him about anything because he was so well versed in so many subjects. So one of the subjects that I wanted to bring up with Ingo when I met with him was, sorry for the noise here, it's a little noisy, this neighborhood. One of the things I wanted to bring up with him was the statement that Russell Targ had made at one of the previous International Remote Viewing Association meetings in Henderson, Nevada last year in 2012. You know, Russell Targ is one of the founders of the program that created remote viewing as we know it in the 1970s at Stanford Research International together with Puthoff. And Ingo was one of their first subjects who they were able to, you know, work with and experiment with to see if this was for real. Well, what Russell told us was, in the middle of his talk, and I don't think he'll mind me telling you this, in the middle of his talk, he stopped and said, okay, everybody, I want everyone to listen up. Remote viewing has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. The reason it works is because you're a large being, I'm paraphrasing here, you're a large being who transcends space and time, and that's why all of reality is perceptible by you. Just paraphrasing what he said. And so some of the previous speakers at the conference had suggested to us that the reason things like remote viewing work, I like to think of it as a type of resonance rather than remoteness. The reason it worked was because it had to do with quantum entanglement, you know, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, you know, some sort of non-local interaction between quantum entangled particles. You know, it's a very hot subject in science these days because of the possible applications. Well, here's what Ingo had to say about that. And this is as far as I can remember exactly what he said. Russell's right. And he turned away and said, but not entirely. And so I was wondering what he meant by that. Not entirely in what way? Well, he went on to tell me his ideas about what he thought was going on here. And what he said was he believed our natural psychic abilities, if you'd like to call it that, for lack of a better word, because, you know, it's not really paranormal anything. It's something that's built into us. This is something that Ingo mentioned many times at the conferences when he spoke at IRVA and so forth, that we all possess a large amount of genetic material that science hasn't explained yet exactly what it does. If you've kept up with any of the literature recently about it, we now know that our genome, only a tiny percent of it is responsible for creating and replicating proteins that make up our cells, that make up our bodies, and so forth. Maybe about 2%, according to the latest estimates. And so science really doesn't know what the rest of it really does. We know that a certain percentage of that remaining 98% is considered regulatory DNA, involved in signaling communication between cells and so forth. But there's still a large part of it that's referred to as the so-called junk DNA. And I believe what Ingo was suggesting here is that that so-called junk DNA is actually acting like a radio transmitter, or a transceiver, if you will. That our DNA has a informational component to it that allows us to receive extra-dimensional, interdimensional information, non-local information, and so forth. In effect, that our DNA acts like an antenna. If you do a quick search about this yourself online, you'll see that there have been some articles about this, most recently in Wired magazine a few years ago, suggesting the possibility from experiments that have been done that DNA seems to exhibit certain properties that even if the organism is not living anymore, there's some radio signals there near the genetic material that can't be explained any other way. And if you think about it, the DNA has a helical spiral shape to it that is reminiscent of an antenna structure and so forth. So that's something to think about. And if you're someone who knows about this, feel free to contact me to share some of this information. But that's literally what he said to me. I wasn't able to go into more detail with him about it at the time because I thought we'd be meeting again. He asked me to come back and so forth, and those other meetings never happened because he passed over before we could do that, sadly. But anyway, those were his ideas about why we're capable of doing remote viewing. I just think it's something to think about, and if we find out in upcoming years that there is really an informational component to DNA beyond our bodies, that's really one of its functions beyond what we think it is now, it'll be quite interesting to see that he was one of the people that was onto this very early. So anyway, I really thought I'd share that with you. Look forward to your comments as usual. Thanks a lot for paying attention, being a subscriber here. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care for now, and bye.
The ability we're talking about is a natural psychic ability that we all have, in spite of what you may have heard to the contrary. People can quiet their mind and describe and experience what's happening in a distant place or in the future. And this has been talked about for thousands of years. Buddhists have a vast lore about what this is and how to do it and why it's desirable. And I'll try and talk about that later. The ability allows you to quiet your mind and describe and experience what's happening in the future. And you can do that independent of the distance. The most interesting thing that we found as physicists is that it's no harder to describe what's happening in Soviet Siberia 6,000 miles away than it is for you to describe the funny object I have in my pocket. 6,000 miles away does not decrease the accuracy or the reliability as compared with something nearby. Looking into the distance is no harder than looking at a contemporaneous event, and that's why this is called a non-local perception. Not quantum mechanical particularly. It pertains to the fact that we live in a non-local space-time described as scientifically most recently by Schrödinger in the 1920s and then proved in the 1970s and 1980s. So the idea of non-local connections is not New Age. This is accepted in the physical community. The hottest topic in modern physics is exploring non-locality. It was described originally by the Buddhists 2,000 years ago, but modern physics has finally caught up.
Former CIA agent David Morehouse claims he has perfected a psychic spying technique called remote viewing. He says he can teach it to anyone.
Exactly what remote viewing is. You have an ability to go into an altered state and to see another human being or anything else, or a person or a place or a thing distant in space-time, and to gather information about that.
To test Morehouse's claims, we devised a difficult exercise. 12 trained remote viewers were instructed to psychically locate and describe the activities of a designated beacon target. For our test, the beacon was driving a motorcycle through the streets of Los Angeles.
The viewers never knew that there was a motorcyclist involved. They never knew whether it was male or female.
Sergeant Rhett Price of the California Highway Patrol observed the test.
I have an open mind, and I was looking at it as a 50-50 proposition that, there's some possibility that this will work out.
When the session was completed, Morehouse reviewed the sketches and written summaries with the beacon.
That's definitely it. Out of the 12 viewers, 9 of the remote viewers indicated that the beacon was female, which was in fact accurate. A number of the viewers described the beacon with dark clothing. The beacon, in fact, had Levi's on with dark leather boots and a leather jacket. One of the viewers had a very uncanny description, which was the beacon as a short female with blonde hair tied back, which the beacon did have the hair tied back in a bandana, and then the motorcycle helmet on over the top of the bandana.
Later, Morehouse and several of the remote viewers retraced the beacon's route, comparing it to the sketches.
There's this pattern.
This is the only way to measure accuracy.
Right.
According to Morehouse, studies indicate that 4 or 5 major hits should be considered extraordinary. Right away, there's a match at a location known as Echo Park.
You can put the tents right in position, right with the fountain, and the tree next to the fountain, and the pathway around the fountain. Yeah, that'll all work really, really good right there. Look at that. Wow.
Perfect.
It's just an incredible feeling to visit this place that I've actually been to before but didn't recognize during the session.
This is really amazing, really amazing. I've never been here before in my life, at least not physically. It kind of gives me goosebumps.
Continuing along the route, Morehouse spots another match.
There you can see the Capitol Records. Which you sketched, Ann. And see why you started getting that kind of, well, that's why you started, it didn't transfer in here, but you're scalloped in your original sketch. Yeah, very famous Hollywood landmark.
Another remote viewer sketched the spire atop the building.
Well, I had just a flash of a strange, odd shape, but it was so distinct. I just wrote it down, but it was separate from whatever it was attached to. I knew it was part of a structure on a structure. So until we were driving today on the freeway, we realized what it was. Capitol Records.
Morehouse and the group covered the entire 15-mile route. There were several sketches that didn't match anything, but there were quite a few that did. A tunnel the target went through. A Y-shaped overpass she drove across. A famous concert hall she passed by.
I sketched the life form. The person.
One match, in particular, surprised even Morehouse.
There are a few things that really shake me up or shock me, but it was really, really interesting today to see one of the viewers pull up a sketch that matched a t-shirt that was on a PA. And that PA happens to be the PA that was standing in front of the beacon adjusting a camera, and that beacon is looking and staring right straight at that particular shirt. It was very powerfully done.
Does remote viewing really work? There's no statistical method to judge the success of these remote viewers, but they did come up with at least 12 major hits, more than double what Morehouse had hoped for. Those numbers were more than enough to turn an impartial observer into a believer.
I have no concept of how this actually works. It's amazing to me. I mean, there was no way they knew what was going on here, where this person was going to be going. It kind of takes you away from the skeptical side a little bit and gives you more of that belief in the fact that the remote viewing technology is something that works.